relationship between Canada and the United States. Pursuant to the motion adopted by the House on February 16th, 2021, the Special Committee is meeting to discuss the economic relationship between Canada and the United States. As agreed, and in order to meet the timelines of the House, today will be the last meeting focusing on Line 5. Now, I'd like to take the opportunity to warmly greet our witnesses for our first panel. From the Government of Alberta, we have the Honourable Sonia Savage, Minister of Energy. From the Government of Saskatchewan, we have the Honourable Bronwyn Eyre, Minister of Energy and Resources. And from the Government of Ontario, we have Bill Walker, the Associate Minister of Energy. So I'd really like to thank all three of you for joining us today and helping us, understand this issue better. I would like to invite the Honourable Sonia Savage to give opening remarks for 5 minutes, please. The floor is yours, Ms. Savage.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the committee members for inviting me today to speak to you, along with my colleagues from Saskatchewan and Ontario, about Line 5. And this is a critical issue, not only for Alberta, but for all of Canada. And to start with, I'm encouraged by the discussions that have been taking place in this committee here. And I would like to acknowledge Minister O'Regan for his strong message, the message he delivered to the committee a few weeks ago, that the continued operation of Line 5 is absolutely non-negotiable. On that, we agree. On that, Alberta and the federal government agree. I'm here today as Alberta's Energy Minister, a position I've served in since 2019. But I'm also very proud of my extensive experience in Alberta's oil and gas and pipeline industry for 13 years. And from both of these roles, I can attest to the fact that Canada's energy sector is resilient, innovative, and drives our economy. And when it comes to responsible production and transportation of our natural resources, Canadians are more aligned than we are divided. And we've clearly seen this evident in this committee here. So as we continue to manage the devastating impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, it's more important now than ever that Alberta and the other provinces and other governments across Canada and the US work together to support a robust, sustained North American energy recovery, economic recovery, and that has to include oil and gas. Alberta's energy sector supports jobs on both sides of the border and plays a vital role in maintaining a reliable North American energy system. Our integrated Canadian energy industry has a long history of developing and implementing technology, having world-leading regulatory and environmental standards, and being a stable supplier to the United States. Enbridge's Line 5 in Michigan is an excellent example of that integrated system. Connecting Enbridge, the Enbridge main line at Superior, Wisconsin, Line 5 is a long-standing route to move Alberta light crude and natural gas liquids to refineries in Sarnia and supplies home heating for thousands of families in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. A shutdown would have a devastating impact on these families. My colleagues here today, I'm sure, are going to agree that the impacts of a shutdown would have a devastating impact on their provinces. I can tell you it certainly will devastate Alberta. A shutdown would create a bottleneck in the Midwest, negatively impacting oil prices. It would limit the flow of up to 400,000 barrels a day of Alberta oil that would have to find alternate routes. Interrupted operation of the pipeline would also impact Alberta propane producers, as Michigan would have to source a more expensive alternate supply for propane from U.S. Gulf Coast or through trucking and rail from Canada. What is possibly most concerning to Alberta, as it should be for everyone here, is the dangerous precedent that a shutdown of a safely operating pipeline would have and would pose for future infrastructure projects. In this regard, we would strongly encourage the federal government to protect Canada's interests by invoking rights under the 1977 Transit Pipeline Treaty. Alberta will stand firmly behind Canada in using that treaty, and we encourage Canada to take a very strong position in the upcoming Line 5 legal proceedings by way of a Canadian amicus brief. The U.S. states are by far Alberta's largest trading partner, and Alberta and Michigan enjoy a robust trading relationship that includes energy and plastics, wood, machinery, and agricultural products. Alberta and Michigan have a strong, healthy bilateral trade relationship worth as much as $9 billion annually in recent years. Trade in Alberta supports upward of 45,000 Michigan jobs. That's part of the 250,000 jobs in the state that is supported by Canada overall. Michigan, the Michigan Peninsula, Pennsylvania, and Ohio are key suppliers of equipment, goods, and services to the Alberta oil sands. We are good neighbors and strong business partners. Our integrated energy sector and critical trading relationships are important for jobs and economies on both sides of the border, and any actions to shut down Line 5 would threaten that relationship. This is a fully regulated, fully maintained pipeline that will only be improved in years to come to ensure the ongoing safe supply of safe operations. I believe that a reasonably sensible solution needs to be found to end this dispute. Thank you, Chair and committee members, for your time, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much for those. Proceed to the Governor of Saskatchewan and the Honourable Bronwyn Iyer. I hope I pronounced your name properly. For 5 minutes, please.
You're on mute, Minister.
She's still on mute.
Yeah, sorry about that. That's precisely why I had someone sit with me in case that happened. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Bonjour, Mr. Chair, committee members. I'm pleased to join you today on behalf of the Government of Saskatchewan to speak on this important issue that has a crucial bearing not only on Canadian energy security, but North American energy security. Enbridge Line 5 is a bricks and mortar, in this case, a welded steel manifestation, a tangible symbol of a traditionally strong relationship, a friendship between the United States and Canada, one we must not jeopardize. As we know, no single political issue in recent years has been as divisive, as charged as pipelines, because no single issue has become as dominant as climate change. But pipelines produce no CO2. They are a mere mode of transport, and yet they have become a symbol of the fight. Project after project has been cancelled. In Canada, Northern Gateway, which had substantial First Nation support, Energy East, which I'm convinced would have led to a stronger national unity in Canada at a time when we needed it. And of course, most recently, Keystone XL for the second time, this time by President Biden. The more this happens, the more we cancel projects and prevent producers from getting oil to Tidewater to global markets, the more oil we have to import, including up the St. Lawrence River, from countries whose human rights records are dire. The more we'll also see strange, hyper-expensive concoctions, such as the Western Canadian oil that had to be transported via the Panama Canal last year, just to get to a refinery on our own Atlantic East Coast. The more we diminish our energy independence. While we wait in Saskatchewan and in the West for what we hope will be an in-service TMX pipeline someday, the only real pipeline egress for our producers is the Enbridge Mainline and indirectly Enbridge Line 5, which connects up to Canada from Lake Superior. The Mainline, which emanates from Hardisty, Alberta, then goes cross-country and cross-border to Superior, Wisconsin, is the great spine, backbone, pick your metaphor, and the only major pipeline left for Saskatchewan oil producers. It transports 70% of our oil. The Line 3 replacement project, I always like to point out, was accomplished, beautifully accomplished, before Bill C-69 even came along. It demonstrated that you could consult meaningfully with literally thousands of communities, including First Nations communities along the route, and empower them and earn their trust just because it made sense to do so. But let's talk about Enbridge Line 5. I always like to use the reasonable person on the street test. If you told that person that Enbridge Line 5 and the portion that crosses the Mackinac Straits was built in 1953 to the highest engineering standards and has operated without any release incident since, and that now, given heightened concerns, which we all understand, Enbridge is going to spend $500 million to build a super tunnel of reinforced concrete that would prevent the risk of an anchor strike, protect the aquatic environment, and enable high-tech inspection and maintenance going forward, I think that person would say, sounds good to me. If you mentioned that Line 5 helps to generate over half the propane used in Michigan, supplies regional refineries, powers the agriculture sector, heats homes, schools, hospitals, and businesses, I think that person on the street, one who isn't blinded by an irrational hatred of pipelines, would say that sounded good too, especially when they learned the new propane proposal put forward in the Michigan Propane Security Plan is woefully inadequate. As for Ontario and Quebec, which Line 5, then Line 9 feed into, those provinces will speak to the importance to them of this crucial line and what their own reasonable people on the street might have to say. As provinces, we all hope diplomacy between the federal, Canadian, and US governments will work on this one, and mediation. But the transit treaty signed between Canada and the US in 1977 sounds pretty definitive to me. It provides, quote, government-to-government assurances that pipelines carrying hydrocarbons owned by one country across the territory of the other will be free from interruptions in flow, end quote. I understand that we all want to make sure the naturally shutting down Line 5 strikes me as some sort of nightmare scenario dreamt up by Ayn Rand, that such a crucial means of keeping families working and warm, businesses in crucial sectors powered, and successful cross-border relationships thriving would simply be shut off. Certainly we in Saskatchewan haven't always agreed with the Prime Minister's policies, most recently around the carbon tax. But I believe Governor Whitmer should examine how politically and ideologically akin she and the Prime Minister are, along with President Biden, even with those who spirited the Green New Deal. And I would ask her not to do this to her friends in Canada and her own Michiganders, to workers and their families, and to remember the strong trading relationship Michigan has with, for one, Saskatchewan, worth $109 million in exports to Michigan last year from our province, and imports into Saskatchewan from beautiful Michigan of $137 million. I would also ask her to keep in mind the powerful statistic that I reference a lot, speaking more globally, that if every oil and gas producing nation in the world extracted oil and gas the way we do in Canada, global greenhouse gas emissions would instantly fall by 1/4. Madam Governor, I would say we are good at this. Let's work together and not jeopardize a beautiful friendship over Enbridge Line 5. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you very much for those comments. And our final opening statement of 5 minutes goes to the Government of Ontario and Mr. Walker. Mr. Walker, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chairs, and committee members, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to present today. I'm pleased to be here as Ontario's Associate Minister of Energy to speak about the importance of the Enbridge Line 5 pipeline to the people of our province, as well as our businesses and industries, and to convey just how vital this piece of energy infrastructure is to the economic, environmental, and energy security, not only of Ontario, but also our neighbors in Quebec, Alberta, and the entire Great Lakes region. Pipelines are essential for our ability to move energy from where it is produced to where it is consumed. They help pay for vital services that we depend on, like healthcare and education, and they create good jobs that support families and communities. Ontario supports the development of pipelines in our province and across Canada. In particular, Ontario supports the continued safe and responsible operation of Enbridge Line 5, and we are profoundly disappointed with the Governor of Michigan's decision to shut down the line in the Straits of Mackinac. This light crude oil and natural gas liquids pipeline, with a capacity of 540,000 barrels per day, has operated safely since 1953. It is a critical piece of infrastructure for Ontario's refining and petrochemical sectors and essential to businesses and communities on both sides of the border. Ontario's 4 refineries ensure that Ontario, Quebec, Michigan, Ohio, and the entire Great Lakes region are well supplied with essential products like home heating fuels, gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel. Line 5 also supplies natural gas liquids to a Sarnia facility that processes them into propane. Simply put, Line 5 is critical to our economic, environment, and energy security. Shutting it down would jeopardize Ontario's energy supply, an energy supply that our people rely on daily. Without Line 5, Ontario, Quebec, Michigan, Ohio, and the entire Great Lakes region would face a 45% reduction in the pipeline supply of petroleum. Enbridge estimates a $14.7 million US gallons a day shortage of gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel. Our country's largest airport hub, Pearson International Airport, relies on jet fuel from refineries supplied by Line 5. Propane supply to Ontario and Michigan could be drastically reduced, causing shortages of an important heating source for large portions of rural Ontario. The implications of a Line 5 shutdown would be dramatic, impacting the fuel needs of the agricultural sector, construction, manufacturing, and many other industries. Shutting down Line 5 would also have a devastating impact on jobs in Ontario, specifically in Sarnia and the surrounding region. Sarnia-Lambton is a major hub for fuel refineries and home to a highly specialized, highly skilled workforce. Without Line 5, an estimated 4,900 direct jobs and up to 23,000 more jobs in supporting industries would be at risk. That represents 1/3 of all jobs in the area. Moreover, it is important to remember that pipelines are the safest way to transport essential fuels across ecologically sensitive areas like the Great Lakes. Shutting down Line 5 would increase transport by rail, marine, and truck, creating additional emissions and congestion, as well as vastly increased costs for business and consumers alike. The reality is we need Line 5, especially as our province and country recovers from the devastating economic impacts of COVID-19. That's why our government is advocating to keep Line 5 operating and why we're working with all levels of government on a united Team Canada approach to resolving this issue. Our Premier, Doug Ford, has met with Governor Whitmer after writing to her previously to underscore Ontario's concerns about the impact of losing Line 5. In February, the Minister of Energy, Northern Development and Mines, Greg Rickford, and I, along with Sarnia-Lambton MPP Bob Bailey, wrote to the Federal Natural Resources Minister to express our concerns and to encourage him to advocate for the continued operation of Line 5 with the new U.S. administration. Last month, the Ontario Legislature held a take-note debate on Line 5 and passed a motion in support of the continued operation of Line 5 with the support of both the government and the official opposition. And Ontario government officials continue to work with their colleagues at Natural Resources Canada and the energy ministries in Quebec, Alberta, and Saskatchewan to ensure we are all aligned on the critical importance of Line 5 to Canada's fuel supply and economy. I understand that federal government officials have been reaching out to their U.S. counterparts, and we appreciate that federal ministers have also made supportive statements about Line 5 to the U.S. administration. While we continue to encourage Michigan and Enbridge to use the ongoing mediation process to settle their dispute, we would also urge the federal government to keep all options on the table. This could include using the provisions of the 1977 treaty between Canada and the U.S. intended to protect cross-border pipelines from regional, state, or local authorities interfering or interrupting an existing pipeline network. It's also important that the federal government work with the provinces to participate in the current U.S. federal court proceedings to ensure that Canada's interests are represented. This could include filing an amicus brief in court expressing the government's support for keeping the pipeline in operation. Ontario looks forward to continuing to work with the federal government, Enbridge, and Michigan to keep the pipeline operating in accordance with the highest health and safety standards. It is our sincere hope that this issue will be resolved positively and that we will be able to focus our efforts on economic recovery. Thank you for your time today and for your efforts to find a solution to this issue, and look forward to any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Walker, and I really applaud all the witnesses. You were bang on time, so I really appreciate that. Minister Savage, if I could just ask you for one small favor, if you could just raise your microphone a little bit. There's a bit of a popping sound that's coming with the interpreters. Okay, thank you. Now we will proceed to questions. For the first 6 minutes, we have Mr. Hoback.
Thank you, Chair, and I would like to thank all my witnesses, all the witnesses for being here this afternoon on such a very important topic, not only for Canada, but for the U.S. as well. Ms. Brown-Nair, maybe I'll start off with you. You made a comment at the very end that if the world adopted our practices, we'd actually see emissions drop by 25%. How do we get that message across to fellow Canadians and Americans just on how good we are at doing this?
Well, we should do everything we can to get that message across. And Minister Savage will have heard me use that stat before, and I'm sure my chief of staff is tearing his hair out. He's heard me use it so many times. I think it bears repeating because it's so difficult, it seems, to be heard on that. And we are green leaders in Canada. We're amazing innovation leaders. It's miraculous, some of the true remediation that has been accomplished at sites, including in, of course, Minister Savage's province in the oil sands area. And it was that statistic that was first shared with us at an energy ministers conference. I believe it was a professor from the University of Calgary, and I glommed onto it immediately because of its positive repercussions for us globally.
You know, I find it really interesting because a lot of times it's environmentalists that are putting the pressure on to see that when we look at the displacement of this oil, it actually gets replaced by something else. And Ms. Savage, you talked about this a little bit in regards to propane. You said that if we don't have this pipeline operating, you know, to replace it and put it on rail just doesn't make sense. Like if you look at us in Saskatchewan, for example, we like to ship grain by train and oil by pipelines. That makes a lot of sense. So Ms. Savage, when you made that comment about propane, how do you see that impacting into the emissions targets that we're trying to reach? And how does it impact in regards to the world as a global network if we're starting to see propane coming from other parts of the world instead of coming out of Alberta and Saskatchewan?
I think we know that we produce our energy at the highest environmental standards, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the areas where we have actually led by many years the United States. In fact, in Alberta, we were the first jurisdiction in North America to put a price on carbon, and we did that over a decade ago in 2007 with our heavy emitters levy on carbon. We have methane emission regulations where we're reducing methane emissions by 45% by 2025. We're ahead of the United States. They're actually looking to Canada. They're looking to Alberta on how do we do this? How do we reduce our emissions like Canada has, like Alberta has? So the one thing we know for sure, when you need energy and you can't source it from your most reliable, trusted sources for a supplier, you're going to get it from somewhere else. So as I said earlier, it would probably mean they need to get propane from the U.S. Gulf states, or it needs to be sources for refining and preparing it would have to come by rail or by truck, and of course that increases emissions.
So, Mr. Walker, how does Ontario feel in regards to having their fate of the Sarnia region and the auto industry in the hands of a court in the U.S.? Isn't that a little bit more concerning, and doesn't that maybe bode well for an argument to actually have an all-Canadian pipeline somewhere in the future?
Very concerned, Mr. Hoback, and to all members of the committee. This is very daunting from an economic, from an environmental, from an energy security. All of our lives will be drastically impacted, on both sides of the border, frankly. This is going to have huge impact to my colleague, MPP Bob Bailey in Sarnia and surrounding area, but all the way through, from Alberta, through Ontario, through Quebec into the Maritimes. This is drastically going to impact all of us. Ontario definitely wants to have a Team Canada approach to ensure that we have a reliable, safe form of energy that's affordable. We're all going to be suffering, as we all are now, through COVID-19. We need the economic recovery to kick into gear, to give people some relief. And this is going to play an absolutely critical part. Agriculture, construction, all industry, frankly, every group in the province is going to be impacted. Our hospitals, our long-term care facilities, everybody's impacted.
You talked about the 125,000 jobs in that. When we go back to a certain that bottleneck, where does it go? What's the consequences of that?
Well, we've been there before, and we know what happens when you don't have enough pipeline capacity to move your production. And Alberta was in that place in 2018, 2019, because we didn't have pipelines built on time. Northern Gateway was vetoed, Energy East was shut down. And what happens when you don't have enough pipeline capacity to move your product is you blow out the differentials. You're selling your product at a price discount. And in Alberta, what that led to was curtailment. production quotas that the government had to put in place to manage production in a very, very unusual way, that in the same sort of way that OPEC countries do. So when you're managing production and you're curtailing it, you're not letting the free market move properly. It leads to loss of jobs. It leads to lower prices. It leads to a lack of investment, and it disrupts the whole way that an economy is supposed to run. So not having a way to move 400,000 barrels of oil on a pipeline is very detrimental to Alberta. We've been there. It would potentially move by rail at a higher environmental footprint, or we would be back in a situation where we would have to curtail production.
Thank you, Mr. Hovack. Thank you. Thank you for that. We will now move for the next 6 minutes to Ms. Bendayan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would also like to thank all of the witnesses for appearing before our committee today on such an important issue. Obviously, I think each of you were quite clear on how important Line 5 is for the various provinces that you represent, and it certainly sounds like we're all on the same page. I believe a few ministers referenced Minister O'Regan's testimony before this committee and how extremely steadfast the federal government is on ensuring that we achieve a resolution on Line 5. But I would like to take a step back for just a moment, perhaps look at the broader context. We are here in this special committee, a committee created specifically to study Canada-US relations. We are 3 weeks ahead of President Biden's Leader Summit on climate, where both Canada and the United States will be setting new enhanced 2030 climate targets. Minister Iyer, you mentioned in your opening remarks that we just received the Supreme Court's decision, I believe a very important decision, affirming not only the federal government's right to price pollution, but also recognizing the existential threat of climate change. So this is certainly an important moment in history. North America is moving very quickly to a net zero future, and our neighbor, Canada's largest trading partner, our closest ally and friend, clearly expects to find a partner on this in Canada, not only at the federal level, but I believe at all levels of government. So as we push to protect critical infrastructure like Line 5, I would like to ask each of the witnesses if you agree that our position as Team Canada can only be strengthened by showcasing with concrete steps our commitment to transitioning to a new low-carbon economy.
Do you want me to jump in first?
Aimeriez-vous que je réponde en premier? Oui, on va commencer avec vous, Madame la Ministre Savage. Merci. Merci.
And I think we've taken some steps in Alberta to having a first jurisdiction to have a price on pollution, ensuring that we have methane regulations. Our oil sands in particular has already achieved a 21% emissions intensity reduction, and many of our producers, in fact, most of the production in the oil sands is committed to net zero. Getting that production to net zero will lower emissions, not only for Alberta, but for all of Canada. But the way we do that and the way we can get there is through carbon capture, utilization, and storage. There is no pathway to net zero in Canada, in Alberta, or really anywhere in the world without carbon capture, utilization, and storage. And that's why we're working with the federal government on solutions on that. And we are working with Minister O'Regan on how can we move forward in a very big way to get to net zero production in the oil sands and in our industries, and that's through carbon capture.
Okay, and perhaps Minister Iyer, yes.
Yeah, sorry, yeah. Well, that's where that statistic I raised earlier is so important, isn't it? I think that we have such a strong record as it stands, from which we can certainly build. And Minister Savage references carbon capture and storage. I think it's also very important to recognize that leading environmentalists say that we cannot achieve Paris targets without the enhanced oil recovery side to carbon capture and storage. So we can't be selective about what kind of carbon capture and storage or utilization and storage we like if we don't include EOR. I think that's extremely important to all targets. In terms of GHG emission, I think one has to be clear on where we are going and how we are getting there. I mean, we should be very clear on the fact, for example, that GHG emissions have fallen radically in the United States because of the use of gas and LNG. So again, if you're selective about which things you like in order to get to the goals we all agree we must get to, that can create something of an issue. I think in Saskatchewan, what we feel is very important is to build on the strengths we have and complement traditional sectors with emerging ones. So lithium, hydrogen, helium, these all build on the strengths we have, and they don't turn our backs hook, line, and sinker on our energy workers. We have 30,000 here in the province of Saskatchewan and all the families that supports. We have to be very cognizant of the cost of some transitions. Hydrogen, for example, if we move to a low carbon hydrogen economy, that will cost hundreds of billions of dollars. Just so everyone is very clear as we move forward on some of these areas that there is a cost involved, socioeconomic and also literal.
A pleasure to be here, and I just have to re-emphasize what Minister O'Regan said. It's non-negotiable. We have to do this. This is today we're talking about for those 23,500 jobs and the 5 immediate jobs that are going to be impacted almost immediately. I think everyone is cognizant that we have to move forward. We have to find other ways to power our economies. But at the end of the day, Ontario has one of the cleanest out there with our hydro and nuclear fleets to be able to provide those emissions free. But to take those type of jobs and the impacts of putting all of the transport of that fuel onto either trucks or even rail adds to the environmental impacts. We are looking at things like hydrogen and small modular reactors through nuclear to enhance, again, that clean ability to provide stable, reliable energy. No one's disputing that we don't have to move, but to come in and say all of a sudden, we're just going to pull this out with no thought process to what the impacts are going to be to the humans. Let's not forget the human impact here of the lives that are going to be devastated and disruptive to try to do this quickly. And I think it was Minister Ayre that suggested again to the person on the street would not seem that is practical, that's realistic, that we are able to do it now, and that we have to have time to be able to do that. We've been doing it for a lot of years safely. There have been no leaks, there have been no spills, and why we can't fathom that we can't do another pipeline in an even more enhanced way for this very viable and effective product, I believe we can and should, and in fact must.
Thank you, Ms. Mendheim. We'll now move to Monsieur Savard-Trobin. Vous avez 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
You have 6 minutes, sir. Thank you. Hello to everyone. Hello, colleagues, and thank you, Chair. Thank you to all the witnesses for their time with us here today. I'm wondering, as you are, in fact, I'll ask Mr. Walker of the Government of Ontario. In September 2020, we know that investments have been made by your government to improve the health of the Great Lakes region. We know that your colleague, the Minister of the Environment, has mentioned and presented the Great Lakes as being an important component of the prosperity, economic prosperity of the province and the well-being of its communities, and that the government was focused on working with its partners to invest in a number of projects there to improve water quality. We know that 95% of Ontario's agricultural land is in the Great Lakes Basin region. So, based on that, the Great Lakes are of great importance to your government. So what do you think of the concerns brought up by the Governor of Michigan and by a number of groups as well, to be clear, about Line 5 and its effect on the health of the Great Lakes? Do you think these are legitimate concerns? Thank you, Mr. Savard.
Legitimate concerns. We absolutely, though, have to look at this in a pragmatic, rational way. We have to have energy stability. We have to move forward. And as I've shared with you, the enhancement of hydrogen, the enhancement of more nuclear. We're refurbishing a big fleet of our energy sector right now to ensure that it's clean, affordable, reliable energy. But as I go back to again, this pipeline has been in existence for many, many years with no concern in regard to release or spills. We believe it can continue to do that while we work on emerging into new forms of technology, new ways to be able to power our economies on both sides of the border. And frankly, we all have to do that for the next generation. But I do believe my riding is on the Great Lakes. I'm surrounded, if you look on the map, Bruce Peninsula, we're surrounded by the Great Lakes, and absolutely that's a concern. But so are the livelihoods of our people on both sides of the border. So is the ability to ensure that we have sustainable, reliable power for our hospitals, for our long-term care facilities, for our constituents and the people we're given the privilege to serve. So I think we can do both of these in tandem. I think we can protect the water, and I think we can protect the environment and protect jobs while we do it simultaneously, and have a plan going forward to ensure that we have new forms of energy in the future. But it just cannot happen overnight quickly as Governor Whitmer thinks it should happen today. Thank you. Merci.
Merci, vous avez...
Thank you. Now, in the Parliament of Ontario, it's been said that closing Line 5, shutting down Line 5, which of course we're not sure will happen. A number of steps would have to be gone through, but it would certainly have an effect on everyone, that it would certainly bring up the price of gas. Has your government carried out any study on this specifically if there were a shutdown? Thanks again.
Prices in regard to fuel, our jet fuel, as I mentioned in my preliminary remarks, Pearson, our biggest hub internationally, is there. That's going to be impacted. The cost of all goods of transport, if you go back to shipping via truck or rail or other ways, are going to be done. Not to mention the environmental impact.
Monsieur Walker, si vous m'excusez, je sais bien que vous estimez qu'il...
Excuse me, I certainly understand that you do think there will be an impact, but have you carried out an actual impact study?
These are ongoing with a number of different agencies, both through the government and some of the other trade unions and a number of other organizations. The Chamber of Commerce has met both the Ontario Chamber of Commerce with the Michigan Chamber of Commerce to take a look at those types of impacts and the exact forms of impact that they're going to have. So I don't have that data off the top of my head, but I believe there are a number of different studies being compiled as we speak, and I trust our federal colleagues are doing the same because, as I've said earlier, this is going to impact Alberta, this is going to impact Ontario, this is going to impact Saskatchewan, it's going to impact Quebec. So all of those are going to be studied and show truly what the impact will be negatively if they're shut down, which we certainly hope doesn't happen.
Parfait, je vous remercie. Donc, cette étude...
Thank you so much. So these studies will be seen, and of course, when they come in, the committee would be very happy to see them. They might be happily received to assist us in our work. For now, though, I understand that it's an observation that you're making more than quoting a study, but exactly how much effect do you anticipate, specifically on the cost of gas?
Number off the top of my head, but I can tell you it will be in the billions when you start to factor in just, again, 5,000 direct jobs, 23,500 indirect jobs just in the Sarnia region alone. Then you start to look at the refineries across Ontario, the refineries in Quebec, the impact to Alberta and Saskatchewan. This is going to be in the billions, and the ripple effect of every single product that you're consuming is going to have an impact and be impacted if you have to go back to transporting using trucks. And again, not to mention the impact to the environment and the environmental costs that will induce as well. So I don't have an exact number, but I'm certain it will be in the many, many billions of dollars.
Merci, Monsieur Savard-Tremblay. Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Savard-Tremblay.
2 minutes, please.
I've said it before at committee, but I think it bears repeating that I think one of the things that distinguishes the issue of the Line 5 pipeline from other pipeline debates we've had recently in Canada, whether it's about the TMX pipeline or the Keystone XL pipeline, are two things. One is that Line 5 actually supports value-added work in the oil and gas sector in Canada by having refining done in Canada as opposed to elsewhere, and then either imported back into Canada or sold on the international market as a finished product from outside of Canada. And the second thing that it does is that it represents existing production. Line 5 isn't about taking more barrels of oil out of the ground in a day than we currently do. It's not a model predicated upon expansion of our daily production. It's a model that represents what Canada is already doing. And from a climate point of view, the New Democrats are certainly of the view that we can't continue to expand our daily production and meet the kinds of greenhouse gas emission reduction targets that we have under the Paris Accord in order to keep global warming effects to 1.5 degrees Celsius. So the Line 5 debate is different in that regard. And of course, we heard some ministers today talk about some of those pipelines that are based on an expansionary model, whether it's Keystone XL or the TMX pipeline. And we've also heard the argument that somehow those pipelines would then help Canadians in Eastern Canada not have to import oil from elsewhere. And it seems to me that there's always a bit of a tension in this argument. TMX is a pipeline designed to get product to Tidewater in order to sell on the international market. We hear proponents of TMX talk about how that's going to issue in higher prices for Canadian oil and gas on the international market. Likewise with Keystone XL, that's a pipeline designed to send more product out of the country as raw material destined for refineries in the southern United States. So I'm wondering if Minister Savage, you could speak to kind of what you think needs to be, whether it's Keystone XL or TMX, those don't seem to me to be pipelines that actually have to do with supplying Canadian oil and gas to Canadian consumers. Those are pipelines that have to do with getting a higher price and making more money in the international market, not the domestic market. Do you want to speak a little bit to that question and how it is exactly that Canadians might expect to have more Canadian oil and gas refined and upgraded in Canada or the TMX pipeline?
Well, I think the one thing that we learned very decisively last year, about this exact time last year when we had an OPEC price war, is that the movement of crude oil is global. It's global supply and global demand. So if we're not supplying the crude from Alberta, from Canada, those same refineries are going to source it from somewhere else. So with that would have moved 830,000 barrels a day to refineries in the Gulf Coast. Well, guess what? Those same refineries in the Gulf Coast are going to be supplied by oil. They'll just have to source it from Venezuela or Mexico or Saudi Arabia for heavy oil supply. Each and every one of those jurisdictions don't have the ESG standards that we do have in Canada. And particularly Venezuela and Mexican heavy oil are at a much higher carbon footprint. And it's the same with refineries in Canada. If they're sourcing supply from places outside of Canada, you're bringing in oil that doesn't have the same environmental standards. So I think you need to look at the energy supply and demand. You look at the North American market as an integrated market, and I think that needs to be supplied from somewhere. And I think that has fundamentally hit home with Line 5 on how interdependent we are with the United States for our energy market. So I would production from Alberta, I think, beats hands down production from anywhere else in the world. And I think displacing it by canceling pipelines and not supporting pipelines, trying to differentiate KXL or TMX from Line 5 is not helpful to finding solutions for climate change.
But to be clear in that case, then you're not making the argument that Keystone XL or TMX would mean more Canadian extracted oil and gas at the pump for Canadian consumers. It's an argument about feeding more Canadian oil and gas into the international supply. That's the argument. It's not about domestic people in Canada
KXL
purchasing Canadian oil and gas. It's about more Canadian oil and gas in the international supply. Is that a fair characterization of your position?
KXL would have provided over $30 billion a year benefit to the Canadian economy. That benefit, $30 billion a year, pays for healthcare and education. It pays for innovation, and it actually funds the type of innovation and technology to our industry to reduce climate change.
If global supply and demand continue, if it's the global market that continues to dictate what's available at the pump, it may well be that even with a pipeline like Keystone XL, if it were to have gone ahead, Canadians would continue in Eastern Canada, for instance, to be pumping Saudi oil into their vehicles, because it's actually multinational companies and international supply and demand that determines what you're buying at the pump. It's got nothing to do with whether a new pipeline is built or not.
Well, and if Line 5 was to be shut down, Line 5 feeds Line 9, which moves oil from Sarnia to Montreal. If Line 5 was to be shut down, then refineries in Montreal, the Suncor and Valero refinery, would have to source supply either by rail or by truck from Western Canada, or import it from the United States by the Portland, Maine pipeline, or bring it in by tanker down the St. Lawrence and bring in OPEC oil and other supply. So the point I'm making is the whole energy is security of supply. It's an interrelated North American energy market that if you don't supply it from Alberta, you're going to supply it from somewhere else.
Thank you, Mr. Blakey. We will now go to the second round for 5 minutes. Ms. Alice Lev, please.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you to the witnesses. If I understand correctly, it sounds like we're all in violent agreement that Line 5 is critical to Canada's economic and energy security by being the only major pipeline for Saskatchewan oil, with 70% of Saskatchewan oil transported by it. For Alberta, we're looking at 400,000 barrels a day. It represents 53% of Ontario crude oil and 66% of Quebec's. It's a critical supply of propane, diesel, jet fuel for Eastern Canada, and many other critical economic and energy impacts. So Canada is highly vulnerable and at great risk if anything happens to interrupt Line 5. So while we're lucky, it seems that at the moment, the shutdown is a diplomatic decision, and therefore diplomacy might be able to solve this problem. However, it doesn't negate the fact that we're at risk if anything happens. And sometimes other forces like tornadoes or other impacts could affect this line. I'd like to ask each of the witnesses, should this be a wake-up call? That should Canada be looking at an alternate approach that would protect Canada's energy security so that all of our eggs are not in the Line 5 basket, but that we could protect energy security in Canada for this critical resource from east to west?
I could jump in first on that, and I think you're talking about Energy East, which was canceled by the proponent by TC Energy in 2017, would have had an all-Canadian route to get supply from Western Canada, from Alberta and Saskatchewan to refineries in Ontario and Quebec using an all-Canadian route. It would have used the existing TransCanada gas pipeline, converted it to oil, and ensured that our supply didn't enter into the United States, ensured that we weren't at risk for the United States not letting the supply out or shutting it down. The interesting thing is the Enbridge mainline, which was built in 1950, chose to use an American route at the time, as it was the most economical route and the most easy route to build a pipeline from an engineering perspective. So they went through the United States to come back into Canada to Sarnia. 6 years later, when the Trans-Canada Mainline was built, it was determined that Canada wanted an all-Canadian route to protect security of supply. And in 2017, we would have had an all-Canadian route underway called Energy East. And unfortunately, that dream was canceled.
Yes, and it's become it's become a diplomatic issue now, and based on the very unilateral decision of Governor Whitmer of Michigan, and so now diplomatic, now legal. As to Energy East, I think we all know some of the difficulties around that. One would need a private proponent. The pipeline would cross a number of provinces. So again, Bill C-69, the Environmental Assessment Act, certainly would come into play, and every province involved would have to be on board. So it's not an effortless thing to overcome, but certainly would be a desirable one. I think to Mr. Blakey's point earlier about where product is going, I guess it's so important to keep in mind, to Minister Savage's points, that there is a very clear export aspect to this, and that price is affected for smaller and larger operators through the differential as a result of the fact that they can't get product to Tidewater because it's interrelated also through exports like potash, like uranium, like many commodities. It's not only a buy local, stay local sector. So I think that is absolutely crucial to point out. Obviously, Energy East would be buy local, stay local, except to get to the refineries out east. But as we say, it's not as if that isn't an issue now. Certainly with the Panama Canal situation we saw last year, that was to get to a refinery out east, and the company had to use the Panama Canal to get to a refinery in its own country. So it's not as if contortions aren't taking place here, and we have to address through whichever means possible, including this issue with Line 5.
Thank you, Ms. Alislav. Thank you very much. For the next 5 minutes to Mr. Housefather, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for coming today. It's always amazing to have provincial cabinet ministers join us at a committee, and I really appreciate you taking the time. And I think it speaks to the multi-partisan agreement that Line 5 is absolutely necessary for Canadian provinces, for our national identity, for jobs in Sarnia and across the country, and also for the economic future of Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and our American colleagues. So it's only logical. A lot of times politics gets in the way, political ideologies, political maneuvering, and I encourage all of us to remember that this is one of the cases where we all agree. So let's keep the issues that we don't agree on, perhaps some other pipelines or climate change or whatever, out of this discussion, and let's all agree on our strategy on Line 5. And how do we get Line 5 to stay in place? So my questions are going to sort of revolve to the legal strategy. And I'd like to ask all of the different witnesses. We've heard from Enbridge that they would like the federal government to intervene in the court case in Michigan. I can certainly see a rationale for that, for the government to argue that the 1977 treaty the federal jurisdiction in the United States covers the inability of Michigan to end the easement. And I would like to know, each of the three governments, have you considered intervening in the court case? Would you only do so if the federal government did? Might you do so anyways? And also, if you've had any conversations directly with the executive in Michigan as a state to province relationship. So whoever would like to go first, west to east, east to west, whatever you prefer.
I'm happy to jump into this one if you.
Thanks, Mr. Walker.
Thank you so much. I think you've hit on the key here, the nonpartisan, the diplomacy. I think, again, this has to be a Team Canada approach. This has to be all of us doing what we are able to do and capable to do and what we bring to the table. We've spoken directly as a province to some of our Michigan counterparts. We've done the Ontario Chamber of Commerce to the Michigan Chamber of Commerce to try to take a look at it from that perspective. And, Ms. Alisev as the last speaker, the at-risk, there is a concern. The cost is of concern. 45% of supply is going to be decreased if this was to close, which will have a huge impact. It's going to impact the environment. It's going to impact jobs, and it truly is a wake-up call. But again, I go back to, I don't think you can shut it down just overnight without wondering what the impacts are going to be to all of those families, to all of the people that are impacted. So I believe this is something that needs to be maintained as a Team Canada approach. It's going to actually impact all of our country one way or the other. And I think at the end of the day, if we can all bring that diplomacy to the table, to put our strengths to work collectively, that we will find a way to work collaboratively to, as well with our colleagues across the border, because they are going to be impacted equally as much as we are here in Ontario and in Canada. So certainly I think we're prepared to work as collaboratively and collegially wherever we can with all of our partners to try to find a resolve.
But intervening in the court case, Mr. Walker? Has Ontario considered intervening?
I don't believe at this point that discussion has been held. I think, again, we'll look to the federal government to lead this, but we'll certainly be there with them arm in arm every step of the way and do what we need to do to protect jobs and families in Ontario.
Thank you.
And I'll just add on that, yes, that I believe there are only a certain number, I believe 4 amicus briefs that are being filed and that are legally convenient to be filed as per the judge's request. And so I think that it's probably preferable is the understanding that it be a federal government amicus brief and support with obviously provincial backing, which we are happy to do in spirit and every other way, as is evidenced by our appearance here today. I think that, the treaty, the 1977 treaty is certainly an interesting one, untested so far in terms of having come up in a situation like this, but I would say pretty relevant if you're going to look at legal, diplomatic and other arguments for why this is something that should apply to that 1977 treaty, which arose under different circumstances but under a Democratic president in 1977 to transport oil from understanding. So certainly an interesting historical.
Very little time.
Yeah, and I
20
agree
seconds.
with the Team Canada approach, and we are working with, our government's working with the federal government, with your government on this. But I think there's a whole approach here. One is diplomacy is best. Enbridge is in mediation on the litigation, but if that mediation doesn't go well, we do need to look at litigation. That's why we're working with a Team Canada approach on having one amicus curiae brief filed, and obviously the 1977 treaty is relevant and should be utilized should we not achieve diplomacy or results in litigation.
Thank you, Mr. Housefather. Monsieur Savard-Tremblay, vous avez 2,5 minutes.
Thank you. I would like to ask Mr. Walker regarding the Great Lakes. Do you have any relationships with the state of Michigan regarding protection? And I'm thinking even before this litigation with Line 5, had you already started some talks with regard to the state of the Great Lakes? Thank you, Mr. Savard-Tremblay.
We share the health and safety of our fellow citizens on both sides of the border. So there are a number of different agreements, a number of different agencies and bodies that interact on a very regular basis. And certainly, my hope would be here again, as we've talked about most of this afternoon, that you will see diplomacy. You will see what. And we will continue to look at those agreements. I think the treaties, the amicus ability to look at those and say, how do we resolve this? How do we come to the table as partners? We are the greatest partners in the world that share borders, that share water bodies. And I think at the end of the day, we can come to a resolve if we take that mindset that it's about the people and we never lose sight of it's about the benefit and the viability of people now and in the future. And we continue to come to the table with open minds, with diplomacy, and try to work together for a resolution that can work for both sides.
Justement, j'ai envie de vous demander comment...
Well, I'd like to ask you how this affects the relationship of your government with the one from Michigan, since we're talking about diplomacy.
Can have differences of opinion, but you still have to come back to the table and find a way to break bread and to ensure that we can continue. We have interconnected trade in all capacities that we have to, again, be wary of. There are families, again, that are going to be impacted on both sides of the border, whether it be jobs that are impacted, whether it's the environmental impact, whether it's the health and safety impact. And I believe, again, if both sides come to the table with a willingness to look at what the realities of today are and what we can do to build the future collectively and collaboratively, then I do believe we will come to a resolve that can suit and benefit both sides of the border, and again, most importantly, the people on both sides of those borders.
Merci, Monsieur Savard-Tremblay. Mr. Blakey, you have 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. In my earlier round of questioning, I was talking about the kind of difference between an expansionary approach in terms of more extraction per day in the oil and gas sector. I want to talk a little bit about the value-added component, because we've seen the federal government, for instance, commit to a project that is likely to cost over $15 billion in the TMX pipeline. We saw the Alberta government invest considerably in billions of dollars in Keystone XL. But when we talk about trying to get more value out of the oil and gas that we extract, not in terms of price on the international market, but in terms of jobs for Canadians, the obvious gap there is doing more refining and upgrading work in Canada. And when we talk about that, what we hear is, oh, well, that's a market decision. Obviously, there isn't a business case, or companies would already be doing it. But when it comes to a pipeline, governments seem quite prepared to invest taxpayers' dollars in those kinds of projects. So I want to ask Ms. Savage what she sees as we, and we're not just hearing this from environmentalists, we're hearing this from very serious international investors who are talking about the reality of climate change, the importance of addressing climate change. It seems to me that in that context, there is a transition away from oil and gas happening within the market itself, not just driven by governments. And it's going to be important to get more value and do more value-added work in the sector for the extraction that Canada continues to do. But we don't see investment in that value-added piece. And I want to know why that is, why it is that, the government of Alberta, for instance, is willing to support a pipeline, but we don't see an equal emphasis put, and it's the same for the federal government. We don't see equal emphasis put on the need to do, we've actually lost refining and upgrading capacity in Canada over the last 20, 30 years or so as the oil and gas industry was booming. So where is the plan to get Canadians doing more of the value-added work in the oil and gas industry?
Minister Savage, just short answer, please.
Sure. One of our key strategies for our economic recovery strategy in Alberta is a natural gas strategy that includes, one of the key planks of that is value added. And that's to ensure that we can add value to our natural gas. That includes creating hydrogen, which of course is a lower emitting source of energy that the world is looking for as we look to lower sources of energy. Another important part of the value added for natural gas is petrochemicals. So we're taking a lot of steps to ensure that we get the full value added for our resources as we come out of economic recovery. So I hear you there. We want those jobs in Alberta to the extent that we can, to the extent that we can create that type of opportunity, and that's a key plank of our economic recovery strategy post-COVID-19.
Thank you, Mr. Blakey. On behalf of the committee, I really want to thank Minister Savage, Minister Ayer, and Mr. Walker for really taking time out of their day and spending some time with us and trying to help us focus on the importance and the sort of advantages and disadvantages of what this discussion or what this decision leads to. So thank you very much on behalf of the whole committee. Colleagues, I just want to suspend for a few minutes so we can do the sound checks for the next panel.
Thank you very much. Have a great day, everyone.
opportunity to really welcome our witnesses which I know will hopefully add to our discussion and help elucidate certain issues with Line 5. I would like to personally invite City of Sarnia, Mike Bradley, Mayor, Sarnia Construction Association, Andrew Pilot, General Manager, and UA Local 663, Scott Archer, Business Agent. So a warm welcome to all three of you. We will begin with you, Mr. Bradley, for opening comments for 5 minutes, please.
Well, thank you very much, first of all, to the committee. I am so you've provided a vehicle to us that we would not have had in the past. And I hope that this committee continues, because as a longtime Border City Mayor, there are many issues that come and go and they don't get the attention they need till they become too inflamed, and then it's firefighting to put them out. I do want to just make a couple of points about Sarnia. Others have spoken about it, about the industry, the value of the industry to Canada. And what I'm really delighted about is that finally the industry is getting some respect. We've been the Rodney Dangerfield of industries for many years. The need of what the petrochemical sector provides is needed in every aspect of Canadians' life. Everything they do, they need the petrochemical sector. From the moment they get up to the moment they go to bed. And that value is often being ignored. And as views change on fossil fuels, and I want to make this point to you, Sarnia is leading in the change on fossil fuels. We had the biggest ethanol plant in Canada here, the first one. We had largest solar farm in North America here. The Bio Innovation Centre of Canada, a federal agency, is located in Sarnia at the Western Research Park. Lambton College is #1 in the country in applied research. So it's not like this community and the industry hasn't said, we need to change. It is still our bread and butter as an industry, and it employs a lot of people. But it also is evolving itself, and it knows it needs to get to a better place environmentally. And where Line 5 comes into play, it has got across to people till we get to a better place where we think we can do more for the environment. We still need what comes through Line 5. And we saw a perfect example of that 2 years ago with the shortage of propane in Ontario and Quebec. And, you know, if I'd said to you a year ago as elected people, you know what's going to bring this country together? It's going to be a pipeline. You would have laughed in my face. The reality is it has brought the political parties together in a nonpartisan way. It's brought Ontario and Quebec together. And that has given us the synergy to move forward on this issue. Because I've been dealing with it now for 1.5 years, 2 years, with very little notice of what was going on here. And now it's reached the point where we've got the federal governments involved. I do believe there are two paths, as you all know. There's the legal one, there's the political one. I think we should try both. But I do want to point out that, you know, there's the two bridges just north of this city hall here. There's $90 billion in trade that goes back and forth between Ontario and Michigan, between here and Windsor. Plus, we have the Paul Tellier CN Rail Tunnel, the main gateway between Canada and the United States in Sarnia. And I do not understand the thinking behind the governor's actions. I understand the environmental thing. I've had issues with pipe. And of all the means of transportation of oil and propane and gas, they're the safest. And our record here shows that. There's 30 pipelines that come into the city, mainly from the west. And we've had very few incidents over the years. We have not had issues with Line 5, and it did have an upgrade under the St. Clair just in the last year or two. But I think, you know, beyond the Line 5 issue, which you're going to hear from the other two speakers, and what I'm delighted about having the other two speakers on this panel is this. Sarnia was in desperate shape 30 years ago. We knew we had to change. We knew we had to evolve. We had to work together. So what we did, we brought business and labor together, and you're seeing perfect examples of that in a few minutes. So business and labor work together. You go to build a new plant in Sarnia, labor gets to vote on it. You get a guarantee of no strikes, and everyone wins from it, and never has one been turned down. So it's got a highly cooperative business-labor relationship. Not that they don't have disputes on occasion, but they are together on this issue and many other issues. But what really bothers me more as a Border City Mayor is that the damage the governor is doing to the overall relationship. You know, our other economies here are agriculture and tourism. Where the hell is that going to be when we get through COVID? Why would we want to cooperate on some of the great initiatives? There are major tourism events that take place out of this community. And the governor, and I'll say this with respect, but with disappointment, will not respond to anyone. Won't respond to the call from the Premier of Ontario. I've written more letters to the governor than St. Paul wrote to the Corinthians, and getting no responses back. And so that's what really bothers me. And that's why I think this committee is such an ideal committee, because I see other issues developing, retaliatory issues, which is terrible. We don't want trade wars. We don't want, with $90 billion going back and forth between Michigan and Ontario a year, that is the wrong direction for both places. And I do applaud everyone from Premier Ford to the leadership of this committee. The Minister, in particular of Natural Resources, has kept in touch and been very helpful. Our MP, Marilyn Gladu, our MPP, Bob Bailey, all together, different stripes. Their politics happen to be wrong in my view, but that's their right in Canada. But the fact is, we've got to repair this relationship. And I would prefer a negotiated settlement than a legal one, because you know what it's like when you have a legal settlement. There's always pain and bitterness after. And we need to repair that relationship. And I do not understand why the government wouldn't at least talk to the leadership in this country to say, these were my reasons. And I would not be supporting Enbridge if it wasn't for the fact they're pledging $500 million, which will be spent in Michigan, employing labor in Michigan to build this coverage that is needed. So it is a puzzle to interpret. And I don't like to ever interpret people's motives or impugn them, but I'm very puzzled if the governor even knows the damage she has done to the relationship with border cities and with Ontario. And now Ohio's passed a motion objecting to the state of Michigan's position. So this is growing, and I just hope we can bring it to an end, because I worry about our own economic development. We have 3 major refineries here. We have other groups we're dealing with, and yes, someone said about we need more refinery capacity. We do, but will we get it here when there's this instability with Line 5? I highly doubt it is the present situation. So I just want to close by saying I thank the committee, but I do hope as part of your mandate when we move through this issue that you'll stay in place to deal with the border issues, to deal with those Canadian-U.S. relation issues that never go away. They go to different levels, but they never go away. So I thank you for your service on this committee, and I hope that we can work together to resolve this issue sooner than later.
Thank you, Mayor Bradley. Thank you for your comments. I would like now to invite Mr. Pilot, the Sarnia Construction Association, to give opening comments for 5 minutes, please. Mr. Pilot, I believe you're muted.
Yeah. Okay, again, just to start over, I'd like to thank the committee again for affording us the opportunity to address them on Enbridge's Line 5. A little about the association, just so you know, and what I'm afraid of here is you're going to hear a lot of the stuff that you've heard before, but I think it's important that we do repeat this. The Sarnia Construction Association is a local mixed trade association. It represents the construction industry in Lambton County. We have 68 unionized contractors. They're all union members, all union contractors, and 23 associate members or suppliers who provide construction services to the multinational petrochemical refinery companies located and operating in Sarnia's Chemical Valley. These facilities mainly produce gas, diesel, jet fuel, and other related byproducts that result from the refining process. And we also have petrochemical plants, of course. The chemical, and you've heard this number before because I heard it previously, the Chemical Valley is responsible for creating 4,900 direct jobs and another 25 or 2,400 indirect jobs in Sarnia and Lambton. Simply put, 1/3 of the population of Sarnia-Lambton relies on the Chemical Valley for employment. This includes our locally based skilled manpower workforce, which works in the construction industry. And that workforce is approximately 6,000 skilled tradespeople working and living in Sarnia-Lambton. Consider this, approximately 6 to 7 million man hours are generated annually in construction work in the Chemical Valley. These are highly paid, unionized, skilled tradespeople. They represent a payroll represents a payroll of approximately $325 million annually. And that's based on 6.5 million man hours at $50 an hour. And these dollars are injected not only in the economies of Sarnia, but also the province of Ontario and Canada. This number simply shows payroll generated in construction. What about all the spin-offs? Man hours has been as high as 10 to 15 million man hours worked in Sarnia in the past. The Sarnia complex is very important to the industrial base of Ontario and Canada. These facilities generate wealth and ultimately tax dollars to governments. And excuse me here. The driving facilities, the facilities that generate the wealth and ultimately tax dollars come from 3 refineries located in the Sarnia region. Consider that these refineries, along with Nanticoke IOL facility, produce gas, oil, and jet fuel for consumption in Ontario only. Almost half of the oil used in the refining process comes. Should the oil, the impact on Ontario and central Canada and the West would be unquantifiable. To maintain these operations, oil would have to be sourced through other means. None of these means are safe environmentally and sound as the pipeline. The truck shipped or moved into the disaster or explosion increases exponentially. Enbridge has offered a solution to the government of Michigan to reduce concern over potential environment exceptional one, and it will continue to meet the needs of our industry, including the energy needs of the Midwest. Line 5 is an important economic link between Canada and the United States. Imagine what would happen if we reduced the flow of oil to our refineries by 50%. That would most likely, Ontario and Quebec would see significant contractions in their economies and standard of living. We believe that Enbridge has offered a safe and viable alternative to current pipelines situated in the lake bed situated on the lake beds in the lake of Lake Michigan. We urge Canada and the state of Michigan and the United States to work jointly to build a better and growing economy in both jurisdictions. Given our concerns, we support Enbridge's Line 5 to build a tunnel to safely deliver oil and natural gas to Canada and the United States. I read that, but I do want to make one comment, just so everybody knows, and Mike touched on this. We have formed a committee with labor, our association has, with the building trades, and we've been meeting with not only with Enbridge, but also with local and provincial and national politicians. We have the support. Our industry has the support, and if you look at this, we have the support of the Ontario Ontario Council Construction Association. Probably represents 37 or so thousand contractors. We have the support of the Canadian Construction Association, which supports our position. We have the support of the building trade, 6,000 tradespeople locally. We also have the support of the provincial building trades, which probably represents another 200,000 or so tradespeople. And we have the support of the Canadian building trades. If you total all that up, well, we probably have 500 or so Canadian building. Line 5. This is an issue that affects everybody in the country, not just the Sarnia area. We may be I would consider the largest industrial center in Ontario anyways. And Line 5 and our industrial center affects everyone. It affects the West where we get our gas. It affects the economies of Ontario. People have to drive to work, and it affects other provinces east of us. So I think it's very important that we look at this seriously. We need to work with Michigan. I truly believe that, and I think we can find a solution. And I think Enbridge has offered that solution. So I'm hoping we can get this resolved so the uncertainty is removed from the economy. comments I have.
Thank you for that, Mr. Pilot. Our last witness, 5 minutes goes to Mr. Scott Archer, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I'm Scott Archer, business agent of UA Local 663 Pipefitters Union of Sarnia, Ontario. I represent our 1,600 local members and the nearly 6,000 family members who depend on them to provide a comfortable middle-class lifestyle. Additionally, we're part of the UA's 53,000 strong Canadian membership and 370,000 members across North America. To start, I'd like to express our thanks for being afforded the opportunity to provide some insight into Line 5's vital importance to the Sarnia-Lambton area's 100,000 residents, the infrastructure, transportation, and manufacturing in the provinces of Ontario, Quebec, and Alberta, and the entire Midwestern U.S. Line 5 is truly the lifeblood of the central region of North America and essentially the spinal cord of Ontario's infrastructure, supplying Alberta crude feedstock to numerous refineries throughout Ontario, Quebec, Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, as well as providing fuel to major international airports in Toronto, Montreal, Quebec City, and Detroit. Line 5 also supplies gasoline, propane, and diesel for transportation, construction, and agriculture. Pardon me. Additionally, over 60% of the propane used to heat Michigan's Upper Peninsula through this past winter that wrought havoc upon the state of Texas and ultimately caused Governor Whitmer to declare an energy emergency in Michigan due to a feared shortage of propane. Well, that very same propane that kept the UP warm and safe was refined in and shipped out from Sarnia, Ontario facilities via Line 5. We are the solution to Governor Whitmer's problems, not the cause of them. It's difficult for me to emphasize how important Line 5 is to our community, as the city of Sarnia has grown and prospered around oil refineries since the mid-1800s, when Imperial Oil set up operations here, and the city has continued to grow along with industry to include 3 refineries and numerous chemical manufacturing clients in the area, mostly fed by Line 5, employing a full third of the city's population, as well as many skilled tradespeople from all around the country during new construction projects, maintenance turnarounds, and expansions to the tune of 300 to 500 million in revenue annually. Line 5 provides the means for working class families to prosper and enjoy a standard of living that embodies what it is to be proud, strong Canadians. I'm going to go ahead and present to you a long list of problems the closure of Line 5 will present, followed by a very short list of solutions. If Line 5 is shut down, you can guarantee the following: immediate fuel shortages at the pumps province-wide for consumers, massive increases in fuel costs, possibly up to triple according to some experts, 800 plus additional rail cars daily, creating drastic increases in rail traffic and unnecessary risks to residents and the environment. Lac-Mégantic and Mississauga are painful, tragic lessons learned in these cases. 2,000 plus trucks overloading already crowded critical arteries of transportation, such as Highway 402 and the Blue Water Bridge, which is second only to the Ambassador Bridge in international traffic volume, with dangerous congestion proven to cause serious traffic accidents and fatalities, as well as unacceptable increases in vehicle emissions. Costs incurred by returning empty rail cars and trucks to point of origin. Pipeline sends product without this hindrance, without increasing carbon footprint, and without the safety and environmental risk of derailment or vehicle crash. The amount of feedstocks to refineries would be greatly diminished, resulting in economic devastation for tens of thousands of families across Canada and the U.S., and sweeping unemployment and closures across industries as diverse as oil and gas, electronics, agriculture, cosmetics, sporting goods, pharmaceuticals, automobile manufacturing, and medical supplies, not to mention tens of thousands of small privately owned support businesses locally. In short, shutting down Line 5 will effectively kill my hometown and displace its families and many more cities and towns like it in Canada and the US. This is not an exaggeration, it's cold, hard fact. In the category of solutions, we have keep Line 5 open and supporting Canadian and US infrastructure. There is no workable replacement for Line 5. 30 years down the road, I'm sure we'll have many more options open to us, but without a cohesive, unifying national energy policy, we as Canadians are left divided and vulnerable to situations exactly like this one. In closing, I'd like to issue a challenge to Prime Minister Trudeau and the federal government. This is a call to action. As Canadians, this is non-negotiable. You need to make a stand to protect Canadian families, businesses, and industry. Exercise your power through the Transit Pipeline Treaty to stop this attack on Line 5, which is an attack on hardworking Canadians, in its tracks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee.
Thank you, Mr. Archer. And we will now proceed to questions. For the first 6 minutes, I have Ms. Gladue. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and I want to warmly welcome our witnesses today and to say how proud I am that we are taking a Team Canada approach with all of the stakeholders working so hard, from Mr. Archer, who brought forward the e-petition 3081 with over 10,000 signatures that I was happy to present in the House, to all of you who have participated in the email and writing campaign to Governor Whitmer and to the Prime Minister calling on him for action. And of course, Mayor Bradley and I have both had meetings with the Natural Resources Minister and a number of initiatives. And our MPP, Bob Bailey, who's not here, has really raised the awareness at Queen's Park and testified on committees in the Senate in Michigan. So it's nice to see everybody working together. I'm going to begin my questions to you, Mr. Archer. Having brought this petition down, why did you think it was important to call on the Prime Minister to intervene?
Thank you. Based on the Transit Pipeline Treaty, it seems that ultimately he is the one that has the power to stop this in its tracks.
Very good. And Mayor Bradley, I know that when we've had our conversations, it's been great that the Natural Resources Minister has said that Line 5 is critical to our energy and economic security. And I did call on the Prime Minister to raise the issue with President Biden, which he did, but President Biden to date hasn't taken any action. Do you agree that a leader-to-leader discussion is needed and that the Prime Minister must get President Biden to intervene to keep Line 5 open?
Well, I'm just a humble mayor. That's a different league that I'm in. My belief is at the end of this, there'll either be a negotiated settlement with the state of Michigan and Enbridge, or it will be a Biden Prime Minister discussion. I do wish, and I have, as you indicated, I've spoken to the minister a couple of times, and he's been very helpful and came out very strongly after one of our last discussions. I think that was the day he came to this committee, is that it's going to reach that level if we can't solve it. But I do not want this, as the MP, to drag on too long. As I mentioned earlier, I'm really worried about not just the economic impact if it does close right now, the chilling impact it's having on us trying to get new development in here when we've got a primary pipeline that's in jeopardy. So, it's not in my league, but I will say this, that it should be number one at the top of the list for the Canadian Prime Minister and the Canadian government, and sooner than later.
Very good. And Mr. Pilat, you're a voice for the many trade unions that are working in the construction industry, and I know that you have brother and sister organizations in all those trade organizations. Can you tell this committee what their effort has been in the support of keeping Line 5 open?
Well, I think it's obvious that everybody realizes the importance of Line 5 to the economies, of just not just locally, but provincially and nationally. All the organizations that we liaison with, and I'm talking about the Ontario Construction Council of Ontario Construction Associations, the Canadian Construction Associations, the Ontario Building Trades, Canadian Building Trades, and Scott is part of that. And they are all in support of the Enbridge proposal to keep Line 5 open, and they're in support of the proposal that would run a tunnel underneath the lake bed of Lake Michigan. I think Scott mentioned it. Just think of what would happen if we cut back 50% of our capacity. What would happen to all the cars that are running on the highways? What would happen to all of this? If people think it's safer, if they think it's safer to run oil by trucks or rail or by boat, I've got news for them. My view, running oil through a pipeline is the safest way to transport it.
Absolutely. And Mayor Bradley, if, as some have suggested, the alternative is trucks and rail cars and barges to transport the material that's coming down Line 5, can you describe the impact both to humans and to infrastructure that this would have on the community of Sarnia-Lambton?
Well, first of all, keep in mind, we're the largest port on Lake Huron. We're at the center of the Great Lakes. We're a shipping center. Keep in mind, we have the second largest rail yard in Ontario, besides Toronto. So we're very familiar with both, and they are both very helpful to our economy. But if we have a choice, as the other speakers have indicated, between rail, shipping, and the pipeline wins every time. And the safety, I wrote a letter to all the mayors in Ontario a couple of weeks ago in communities over 50,000. Wasn't looking for an endorsement, just wanted to warn them. Higher fuel prices are on their way, more cars, rail cars, more trucks, and less safety is going to happen if this line closes. So when you hear the overall argument from Governor Whitmer about saving the environment, you add up those factors and say, well, how's that helping the environment? More rail cars, more barges, more ships. It just doesn't add up.
Yeah. And do we know how much an Enbridge Line 5 shutdown would cost the city of Sarnia?
No, I can't answer that question. Enbridge is in the region. And being quite honest, it's the jobs that matter. Pipelines, by their very nature, don't pay a lot in taxes, but it's the jobs, it's the added value jobs. And you know very well that we have the refineries here. We have a very robust industry, but then we have this massive secondary ring of suppliers that support that industry, including those 6,000 skilled tradespeople. So that's where the real ripple impact is on the economy, not just in Sarnia-Lambton, right across this region, right across the province.
Thank you, Ms. Gladue. We'll now go to Mr. McKay for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to each of the witnesses. I'd like to enter into a conversation with Mayor Bradley. Mayor Bradley, you are a hugely successful mayor. I think 10 elections in a row. You've been incumbent since 1988. And as we have listened over the last few weeks to the people who come before us, the arguments are compelling. I think I adopt Ms. Aslev's views that we are in radical agreement. So it does seem to come down to a political decision. And so I'm going to ask you, as a practicing politician, talking to other practicing politicians who apparently has written more letters to the governor than St. Paul wrote to the Corinthians. I hope your fate is not the same fate as St. Paul. How have you received any indication from the governor as to what her rationale might be for this internationally disruptive position she's taking?
Well, thank you. That's a very thoughtful question. If I could just, on the first part about being one of the longest serving mayors, I've ran on every election on a simple platform. Please re-elect me till I get it right.
I think I'll adopt that one. I like that. Yeah.
Well, it's guaranteed because none of us ever get it right? Yeah. There's someone else somewhere else doing a lot better, whether you're an MP, a mayor, or a MPP. I can't fathom what is going on in the governor's mansion in Lansing. None of my letters have been responded to. And that's, I understand. I'm a mayor from a border city. The Premier of Ontario calls and they won't speak. I believe the federal government's had issues in trying to connect directly. And that's what's so puzzling. Oh, all of us deal with people that we maybe sometimes don't want to deal with. We all deal with people that we disagree with, but we listen. And as far as I know, the governor has not. There was one apparently side conversation on the Gordie Howe Bridge with the transport minister, and it was apparently very brief. Other than that, no one has been able to get to speak to the governor. And you really wonder then the logic of the argument that you're not willing to confront the people that do have a different point of view. So to the best of my knowledge, and I understand too, the Consul General in Detroit has had the same sort of shutdown of access. And I just do not understand, going back to what I said during my remarks, was Does the governor not understand the damage to the ongoing relationship, whether it be the agriculture community, whether it be tourism, the border city relationship? I've been meeting with Ontario border city mayors for the last year, obviously, and we've been working with the federal government and talking to them about a reopening plan, a long-term sectional reopening plan. How does that factor in when you have a governor in a state that has horrendous increases in COVID in the last little while, won't even talk to you on another issue? And that's what bothers me. I can tell you this in closing. I've always thought highly of the governor. When she ran, I was very impressed with her skills and her ability to communicate to people. And so what is happening with this, I'm just not going to talk to anyone, I do not think is serving the people of Michigan very well.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've heard her interviewed, and I've admired her skill and her abilities, and she certainly had some confrontation with the people who wanted to take over the legislature, and I thought she handled that as well as could be handled. And at one point, she was being considered for the ticket with Biden. Immensely skilled, apparently quite intelligent, but unable or unwilling, I guess unwilling to talk to you or to talk to the premier, and the federal government's having difficulties talking to her directly. So the whole thing doesn't make a lot of sense. And so I wanted to maybe take a sidebar here. Enbridge's reputation in Michigan maybe leaves a little bit to be desired. I think that's a understatement of understatements. What is your view, as a practicing politician, as to how that plays through in this dispute?
Well, I think there's a direct linkage, and I always make it very clear that I'm not representing Enbridge. I'm representing Sarnia and the workers here, and the people that benefit from Enbridge being here. And they're big enough to take care of themselves. But there's no question that gets thrown into the mix. And I ask people to judge Line 5. I ask people to judge the $500 million that's going to be spent on it. I ask them to judge the upgrades that have been made here when they didn't have to. So that's the way I'm trying to approach it. But I will say the tactics have changed. In the beginning, my letters were going to Whitmer, and I've had good relationships with other governors. Jim Blanchard, who was the former American ambassador to Canada, was great to deal with. Often came by the city and just said hello, and we had a good relationship. This is different. So that's why the tactics changed. Enbridge was part of that, and so was the many other groups like, the agriculture groups and a number of the people that Ms. Gladou's been working with, is that we decided we need to talk to Ottawa. We were not getting anywhere, any traction at all with the governor of Michigan that appealed to friendship and trade. And by the way, in 2018, Ontario and Michigan signed an agreement to expand trade, to work closer together, all forgotten with the change in the government. So we turned to Ottawa, and I think Ottawa has been supportive, particularly in the last few weeks after the minister appeared at this committee. And I think now we really are more depending on Ottawa to win it in Lansing.
Yeah. We're down to kind of...
Thank you, Mr. McKay. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Mr.
Thank you.
Monsieur Savard-Tremblay, vous avez 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Merci.
Thank you very much. So I would like to thank our witnesses. Thank you for your presentations. I have a question for Mr. Andrew Pilat, from the construction specialist. So there are groups opposing this project, saying that there are environmental issues, that there might be a failure in the pipeline, which may lead to a spill that could be very tragic. Hydrocarbons being spilled in the strait. So with your experience in construction, what would be the probabilities that Line 5 may spill over into the Mackinac Strait before the end of the construction of the tunnel? So there are 2 questions in one here. Thank you in advance.
Would I be able to jump in for Andy for a minute on this one? I know it wasn't directed to me, but that line has been in service for almost 3/4 of a century, and it hasn't leaked a drop into the Straits of Mackinac. Now, the the flip side of this is Enbridge would have had the tunnel completed within a year from now if the governor had not intervened. So I don't know where the governor's head is at in this, but the risk would have been greatly mitigated if she had not interfered with the tunnel project in the first place. And secondarily, I don't see a risk with the quality control and inspection and maintenance programs Enbridge has in place. I think we're very safe.
You're supposed to hear it right through the speaker.
Right.
Mr. Pilot, you can speak if you'd like.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question. I don't know how to turn the computer on to translate for me. So I'd have to hear the question again. I apologize. I apologize.
So I can repeat the question, and I would like, Mr. Chair, that this time not be deducted from the speaking time that I have.
No, but is Mr. Pilot, are you able to hear the translation?
Now I am. Now
you are? Okay. Commencez, monsieur.
Mr. Savard-Tremblay, you have the floor. So this is a question. We know that groups opposing this project often cite environmental concerns. So they fear that there might be a spill, a tragic spill of hydrocarbons in the strait. So with the expertise that you have in the construction sector, what are the probabilities that Line 5 may cause a spill of crude natural gas in the Mackinac Strait before the project is completed? And second question, once this project is completed, what would be the probabilities?
Well, it's difficult to speculate. I can say this, that the two lines were built in the 50s, and since that time, there hasn't been any spills in the Straits of Mackinac. Pipelines have a lot of backup systems, et cetera, and I would imagine there'd be they would design it or engineer it so that there would be absolutely no spills in the tunnel. I think the tunnel is an absolute guarantee of no spills into the lake. But currently, even with the existing lines, there haven't been any spills since the 50s. And they've, my understanding and from the pictures I've seen, the lines are in good shape. The current lines are in good shape. So I don't expect any spills until the tunnel is built. I mean, the tunnel is going to be 80 feet or 100 feet below lake bed. And it's going to be somewhere in the range of 15 feet or so. So it's going to be well protected. And again, backup systems, considering all the let's say all the attention Line 5 is getting, I'm sure that it is going to have the best of everything to ensure that it'll be environmentally safe. Hope that answers your question, sir.
Yes, thank you. And now I would like to ask that since we look at the past, if we say that in the last 40 years there haven't been any problems, what would be the life expectancy, so to speak, of a pipeline, on average?
I couldn't answer that. They could last 100 years if they're well maintained. But I honestly can't answer that. I'm not an engineer, I'm not a pipeline engineer, but certainly pipelines. I think Mike mentioned, and we've got a 30 or so crossing the river here, and there have been no difficulties since they've been put in. So pipelines are a safe way of transporting energy, and safer, by far safer than trucking, by far safer than barging or boating, by far safer than rail, because it doesn't take much to derail a train. But again, with the pipeline, there's a lot of backup systems. So if there is a spill, it could be shut immediately, reducing the amount of spillage in the environment. So How long do they last? I can't tell you, but I know Enbridge and other pipeline companies have exceptional maintenance programs. Accidents do happen occasionally, but they have exceptional maintenance programs because of the heightened awareness of what will happen if there is a spill. So I'm not worried. I think I trust the people, and they have an excellent safety record as far as I'm concerned.
15 seconds, Monsieur Savard-Tremblay.
Okay, so
In 15 seconds, I will thank you for your answers.
Merci, Monsieur Savard-Tremblay. We will.
Thank you, Mr. Savard-Tremblay.
Mr. Blakey for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I want to begin by kind of addressing my initial comments, I guess, to Mr. Archer, who had raised the importance of having some kind of cohesive energy strategy for Canada, which is not a position that we currently find ourselves in. I think obviously there's a tension between the very expansionary type of posture that Canada has had towards oil and gas development over the last number of decades, and Canada meeting its greenhouse gas reduction emission targets under the Paris Accord. But as previous witnesses quite rightly pointed out, even if we're successful in reducing emissions in transportation, and even if we're successful to some extent in reducing the emissions that are a result of extraction, and even if we're successful in reducing our emissions for power generation, for instance, there's still going to continue to be a demand for oil and gas, and the petrochemical industry is an obvious example of that. And people, electronics are everywhere, and even every year it seems to get further and further integrated into our lifestyle. So it's a product that there's going to continue to be demand for. The question is, how do we have a sustainable industry, both environmentally and from an economic point of view? Because the boom-bust cycle of the oil and gas industry in Canada has been hard on Canadian workers who plan their life around a career and then find that the market goes into a different phase, and suddenly the things that they thought they could depend on aren't there for them anymore. And so it seems to me that the obvious answer to that is some kind of strategy. But even earlier, what we heard is continuing to talk about, just simply needing to let the international oil and gas market do what it does, with no real indication of what I would call a meaningful strategy for how to have both an environmentally and economically sustainable future. So I wonder, Mr. Archer, if you want to speak a little bit more to that question of having a strategy and what that means in terms of government involvement in the industry, and what that means in terms of expectations of private players within the industry to put what may well be a somewhat smaller industry on a sturdier footing for the kind of demand that may persist past when we're able to use renewable energy for heating and transportation.
Thanks, Mr. Blakey. As far as differentiating between pipelines, I don't think that's a great plan. The oil industry in Alberta and Saskatchewan and Ontario, my hometown is where the first oil refinery in North America was. The very first Imperial Oil facility was built here. We've all taken a beating lately due to basically the pressure that's been put on the oil industry, and really we need to loosen the reins up on that. Energy East would be a fantastic plan to get Alberta crude to our East Coast refineries. It would get Alberta back on its feet. It would get the East Coast pardon me, it would get the East Coast using Canadian oil in Canadian refineries. Keystone XL, any other pipeline that is used to transport Canadian oil to the States, how can it be a bad thing to get our oil industry back up and running, to bring billions in revenue back into Canada? Because let's face it, the oil that the Americans use, or any oil that would be shipped offshore, it's just going to come from someplace else. It's going to come from the Saudis. It's going to be oil that's being consumed And it's like we're punishing oil and gas workers for being oil and gas workers. There's no benefit to preventing our oil industry from thriving, right?
Sure. I mean, I'd open up the question to other witnesses who may want to talk about, what a strategy looks like. I think as Canada tries to meet its climate change targets, an unlimited expansion of fossil fuel extraction is not going to be compatible with that. But one thing that we can do is try and get more value out of every barrel extracted in Canada. And that means doing more of the kind of work that's done in Sarnia with respect to refining and upgrading and, actually specializing in taking that raw product and entering into and creating Canadian jobs in the market of value-added work and creating value-added products. So I'm wondering if any of our other witnesses might want to speak to the potential of that, something that I think differentiates Line 5, not just because it's already an existing pipeline, but also because of this potential for value-added work from projects like Keystone XL and the TMX pipeline.
Well, Mr. Blakey, if I can say that that's exactly what we're trying to do here in Sarnia, that it's critically important. We recognize things are changing and changing very rapidly. That's why we have the Bioinnovation Centre of Canada. We've approved a number of projects that are now being developed on the former Dow site, which was a major industrial place. We have looked at other things that we're now focusing on hydrogen. And I'm really pleased to see the federal and the Ontario government, and I believe the Alberta government, are now looking at hydrogen seriously. We looked at it as a community 10 years ago, and we couldn't make it work economically. But now we're manufacturing hydrogen here. The local college has probably 10 to 15 projects, hydrogen-based, that they're developing on the research side. So we've recognized that but I know exactly what you're trying to get to, which is no one's really pulling it all together. No one's really pulling it all together and saying, we can advance in this area and this area. And, people in this community, I tell them, and I can tell you, I've been unpopular at times because I've said, we've got to change. And instead of standing up and saying, well, no, we're going to change, you need to change and just leave us alone. The reality is, if we don't change, we'll be dinosaurs. And we have the opportunity with what's going on in hydrogen. Even Line 5 has reminded us of the value of fossil fuel, but how we can also start to look and need to continue to look to find other ways of that added value instead of shipping it to the United States. That to me is the key. Added value in Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Blakey. We will now start our second round with Ms. Gladue for 5 minutes, please.
I didn't want to.
Thank you, Chair. And Mayor Bradley, I just wanted to correct the record. I know you had said that Premier Ford couldn't get a call with Governor Whitmer, but we heard testimony earlier today at committee from Associate Minister Walker that, in fact, he did get a call, which is good. But I do know that Minister O'Regan has been very frustrated that he cannot get a call and many cannot. Alors, j'ai une autre question.
So I have another question. I would like to know, if Line 5 is closed, what would be the effect on agriculture and rural citizens in our riding?
I'm sorry, was that question directed to me?
Yes, please.
Okay, I only caught the last part.
If the Line 5 shuts down, what are going to be the impacts on agriculture and the rural parts of our riding?
Well, I think, well, first of all, can I say that if I'd known Premier Ford had got through, I would have asked him to ask the good governor to write back to me. I'm feeling very isolated, very lonely, not getting any responses to my many letters. I will say, yes, there's going to be huge ramifications. I welcome that the Lambton County Federation of Agriculture and the Ontario one have jumped in big time. And we saw that 2 years ago, right, with the shortage on propane. It had a devastating impact and almost closed down the industry at one point. So that's what I think is marvelous about this event in the sense of what's going on is that it has a cross-industry sector impact. And that's what's brought all of us together to fight back and say, let's work our way through this and negotiate a settlement. So yeah, there'll be no question there'll be a significant impact on Ontario and on Quebec in agriculture.
And Enbridge has suggested that the federal government should submit an amicus brief of support when the matter is heard to try to get it heard at the federal level, and to consider filing suit of treaty violation if Governor Whitmer doesn't rescind her executive order. Do you agree that these actions are important, and what else do you think the government should do to impact this issue?
Well, I'm not a lawyer, but I will say that from what I understand, that it would be the right decision to do by the federal government when they're ready. And it's a question of timing too. There's the political front, there's the legal front. And it's a question of how you want to touch both levers. So I would support the federal government. I think the community would if they would go forward on the legal challenge. And again, as I said earlier, time is the issue. The longer we're having this debate, the longer this continues, the more damage it's doing to the Canadian economy and potential investment in this province, in this country.
Absolutely. And Mr. Pilat, just what would your final comments be if you could tell the Prime Minister what you'd like him to do? And you're on mute.
There. Well, I think I agree that we're far better off with a negotiated settlement than we would be with a legal settlement. I think I would like the Prime Minister, if he could, to talk to Governor Whitmer and again to President Biden and just stress the urgency of this matter and stress the importance of it. I mean, we're literally talking about ripping the legs out of our economy in central Canada. And in let's face it, in many of the Midwest states here in Ontario, in the United States. So I think we have to proceed urgently on this matter. It's important we get it resolved. I always feel a negotiated settlement's better than a legal one. But if we have to go the legal route, we go the legal route. And I think the governor should be aware of that. And I am quite surprised that she hasn't felt the pressure from the surrounding states who are dependent on the fuel that comes out of Line 5. Because, I mean, it goes back and forth across the border. The Line 5 goes down to, or the oil that comes through Line 5 goes down to the Toledo refinery that supplies all the jet fuel for the international airport in Detroit. Line 5 supplies all the jet fuel that goes to Toronto. I mean, to the Toronto.
All right, I don't have very much more time. I just want to give Mr. Archer final comment. What would you have the federal government or the Prime Minister do?
Just spring into action, basically. The Prime Minister needs to deal directly with President Biden. I don't feel that we can trust the courts with this. It's a giant issue, and if it's not resolved, it is going to destroy this town without a doubt.
Thank you, Ms. Aleslav. We will now go to Mrs. Romanato for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to thank the witnesses for being with us today. There's some elements that are always brought forward at these committees that we may not have heard. One thing I just want to clarify and make sure it's on the record, this committee over the last 6 meetings has heard from a various amount of witnesses, and we have not heard once anyone say that this is a good idea to close down Line 5. And the representatives of Michigan have been invited to this committee to for us to be able to hear their side of the why, the question of why they're going this route, and they have declined. So this committee has been trying to, make sure that we have all of the information so that we can do a proper assessment of what the situation is. I understand now that the Attorney General of Ohio has filed an amicus brief back on March 19th. Louisiana is also in agreement that this is a bad idea. We've heard from pretty much everyone, and I didn't have a chance to talk to the provincial representatives in the previous panel, but I wanted to check with Mayor Bradley. You talk to us about the importance of and the impact that this would have on Sarnia. You've mentioned that you've written to all the mayors in Ontario. And one thing I haven't heard yet is if anyone has had conversations with their counterparts across the provinces. So for instance, Mayor Bradley, have you had a chance to speak to Mayor Valerie Plante in Montreal, given the fact that Line 9, which is directly connected to Line 5, goes to the Suncor refinery in East End, Montreal. 66% of supply to Quebec flow through that. So I'm not sure, have you had a chance to reach out to the mayor of Montreal to see if there was an opportunity to have a joint front on this? If you could elaborate on some of the efforts you've made across the provinces versus, strictly in Ontario.
Well, that's an excellent question. No, I have not. Not diminishing my role as mayor. I've got myself and one assistant, and trying to have the resources to reach out and do things is very difficult. And I'm very grateful that I've got support in the community, which has helped carry that burden forward. But it's an excellent suggestion. We are, just as we are tied in so deeply to the West, we are tied deeply into Montreal. And in fact, at one point in time, we had a great movement of people between Montreal and Sarnia. And there are strong roots here to this day through Imperial Oil. So yes, I will follow up on that. It's I should have done that, but I didn't do it. But it's a good suggestion, and I will follow up immediately tomorrow.
Thank you. I think it would be helpful for folks in Quebec to realize the impact that this will have, not only for folks in Ontario and Western Canada, but also in Quebec as well. I think that would be helpful. With respect to Mr. Archer, I know that the petition that my colleague Marilyn, who has talked my ear off about this issue, so she is absolutely an advocate with respect to what's going on with Line 5. She tabled this back in, I believe, on the 10th of March in the House, so a response is forthcoming. Can you talk a little bit about additional advocacy efforts that you've made in terms of making sure that folks know about what will be the impacts of a closure of Line 5?
Yes, thank you. I've done interviews with the Financial Post, Global News, CTV. I've done a couple of CBC interviews, both a regional one out of Windsor and a national program out of Alberta. Just every media outlet that I could get someone to answer a phone call or an email, we've done interviews with them.
Okay. And so I know I only have about 45 seconds remaining. I just wanted to ask if there was any other comments you'd like to add. I believe this is our last meeting regarding Line 5. So if there's any other points you'd like to get out on the record so that we can make sure that we include those in our deliberations.
If I could make the point, the former governor of Michigan approved this pipeline and negotiated a deal. The federal regulatory agency in Michigan approved this deal. What the governor is doing, and it's a big issue in the States, is interfering in the role of the federal government. Now, I know that never happens in Canada, but it does happen in the US. And I think that's the key point. Keep on hammering home, it's illegal, and it's important that we get our relationship in general back in shape. That's the big issue for me. It's beyond Line 5, it's the Canadian-American-US relationship.
Thank you,
very
Mr.
much.
Romanado. Monsieur Savard-Tremblay, vous avez...
Mr. Savard-Tremblay, you have 2.5 minutes, sir. Thank you so much. Give me just a moment, if I may. Yes, I'm terribly sorry. Very well, then. My questions are for Mr. Archer. Earlier, you did take some time to answer a question I was putting to the gentleman from the construction agency. So now I would like to ask you another question about the average lifespan of a pipeline. I know that it's supposed to be a minimum of 20 years of viable use. In the case of this Line 5 pipeline, how long will it last?
There are many pipelines in service that are of the same vintage of Line 5. It's really, a lot of them will outlast you and I, especially due to, in more recent years, the increased quality control and the increased inspection programs, especially through pigging programs, smart pigs that they run through the lines they can do internal inspections over great distances in extreme detail. The technology has helped greatly, so that alone can extend the life of the pipelines substantially.
Mm-hmm.
Additionally, they also are constantly monitoring and testing. Enbridge in particular, I know from experience, before I was in this office, I ran several pipeline jobs on Line 9, where we installed remote valve locations, and their inspection program is so stringent. It's absolutely maddening for someone who's trying to run one of those jobs. Their red book will make you pull your hair out. It goes to such great detail.
Merci, Monsieur Sarah-Tremblay. Merci. And for the final 2.5 minutes, we'll go to Mr. Blakey, please.
Thank you very much. Obviously, a committee like this takes a lot of resources, and we've heard now over many meetings, many witnesses, and from members of the committee itself. And there seems to be a pretty strong consensus in respect of Line 5, whatever other differences we may have of opinion about the future of the oil and gas sector and how best to manage that, how to get the most value out of it for Canadians in the context of fighting climate change. But on this issue, there does seem to be a pretty strong consensus. So I'm wondering, the committee continues to meet. We continue to hear a lot of the same messages. I mean, how do you think we can get the most value out of this committee, given all the resources that have been allocated to it, when there actually seems to be pretty strong agreement? How do we get the most bang for our buck out of these committee proceedings? And what are some of the? We've also heard that whether it's federal government or provincial governments across the country, there seems to be a pretty united front in impressing upon the U.S. the importance of Line 5 continuing until there's an environmentally adequate replacement. So, I guess I'm asking, how do we get value out of these proceedings in terms of action when it seems that most people were already committed to defending the ongoing operation of Line 5? If there's any ideas about that.
There's 1 minute left. 1 minute left.
If I could just respond to that, it's an excellent question. I think the committee needs to start looking at some timelines, some deadlines. And those deadlines aren't met as it relates to the diplomatic approach, the political approach. Then I think you need to take a look at, then the legal action must be activated. And so that we're not just waiting and waiting and waiting for the Americans to respond. I think some deadlines would be very helpful, and then the legal action could take place if we're not successful.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Blakey, and a special thank you, a very special thank you to Mayor Bradley, Mr. Archer, and Mr. Pellet, sincerely for really giving us a local perspective, because I think we also needed to hear that. We've heard the national perspective, and in some cases the international perspective, but to really give us a local feel on the ground, we sincerely appreciate taking the time today, and hopefully we will resolve this issue. And to the rest of my colleagues, we will see each other on Thursday.
Thank you.
Okay, take care.